Hi, everyone. Welcome to the second episode of my podcast. My name is David. I'm just going to get into it. The last episode I recorded was 2.5 months ago, and I'd like to do a episode once a month to start. Uh, and so it's a little bit longer than what I'd like, but it actually gave me some time to uh, reflect on what I had said in the last episode and kind of get my thoughts in order and concentrated to where I would feel comfortable expressing it. On the other hand, this podcast is more, for right now, it's going to be on the casual side of me just talking about my experience and my views of dreams and how to use them, how to make I've made a lifestyle of them, and how I do that. I wanted to share that. So last time around, we were talking about the Tibetan Buddhist dream yoga practice of illusory form, and uh, I want to back up just a second and just say Tibetan in general, because while there is some crossover there because the one of the more well-known teachers of dream yoga is Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche, and he is well versed in both the indigenous Bon tradition of Tibet and also the Buddhist tradition. And those they've kind of intermixed over time. But I did want to kind of just express that it's not just Buddhism that is responsible for these teachings. There's also the indigenous tradition there is very much a part of of how these practices developed in Tibet. So, what I was talking about in the last episode is illusory form, and just kind of going over a basic definition of it and how I practice with it. And at the end of the last episode, I had mentioned how I wanted to go over kind of some nighttime exercise visualizations and some other things related to that. But I want to kind of round out my perspective on illusory form and go a little bit deeper in some aspects of it. So I just want to start by going through my experience since my last recording, which was in the middle of March. Right now, it's the beginning of June. And really, I have uh, gotten a better handle on the kind of phenomenal experiences of illusory form. And it's taken a lot of daily reflection and week after week feeling it out and I feel like after a year and a half now I'm starting to shift into a different mode where my before I was kind of forcing it, and now I'm starting to get into a place where I'm kind of the structure is there, and now I'm just sort of fleshing the structure out, solidifying the practice, and starting to get into some more uh, intense and deep experiences with these exercises and practices. So one thing I was talking about that I really wanted to get into was last time was uh, the experience of floating in empty space, this 360 awareness. And I also talked about how it has a bit of a dark side as well, because you can sort of lose track of yourself in a way. And I watched, I talked to some people on Discord on an occult Discord, and I was describing my experiences, and one of them mentioned, this sounds like a derealization experience. And so I looked that up, and is something that I had actually looked up in the past, and uh, in relation to psychedelics, I had actually um, heard about it in that context. And so I started looking into that a little bit, and I started seeing that people have had this experience in after meditation retreats. And then I remembered Andrew Holacek talks about how he had this experience of being completely convinced, or at least having an overwhelming sensation of being in a dream, even though he was awake. And he had that for 2 weeks, 3 weeks straight. It was a few weeks straight, and he started kind of losing it. And so he actually ended up just dropping everything and going on I think it was a ski trip somewhere with friends, just to relax and kind of get away from it all. Uh, and I was watching a YouTube video where this guy was talking about his experience of derealization after a Vipassana meditation retreat. And he asked the teacher what he should do, and the teacher just said, just take a break, you know? And so um, that's what I did actually. I took a few weeks off and just, uh, kind of engaged with my senses and just relaxed. And I, I basically didn't practice for a few weeks, just to get myself back in my body, really. And so I just want to break down what this experience was like. And, I this isn't meant to. Well, it's gonna make illusory form sound a little bit scary, so that's just the way it is. But I also want to share ways of balancing that out. So the uh, the sensation for me was, in the last episode I talked about how practicing it on a daily basis slowly but surely started to create this continual mindset where I wouldn't even be consciously uh, intent intentionally practicing illusory form, but the mental mindset or mind state would almost like spontaneously propagate, like just kind of all of a sudden I'd be sitting there doing work or something, and it all of a sudden my perspective is like I'm doing the illusory form exercise, and that started happening several times a day. And I started to get this sensation of not being able to escape it, and wondering, having this feeling that I was going to lose something, because in this process of seeing everything as an illusion, as a dream, there are certain comforts that tend to fall away. Uh, these sort of we get into fantasies and dreams in our daily life. And as I started becoming more into the practice, I started wondering or worrying that I would lose that experience. And, we, I I think everybody loves a good story in, whatever form you might like it. TV shows or movies or books or podcasts or, radio, whatever, storytellers. And that is something that I really enjoy. I love living in the imagination. Um, And I got this worry in my head that like I was just going to be in this constant state of like a live wire, just open and raw, and that I wasn't going to be able to kind of dive deep into a fantasy, which is something that I think we all enjoy. Um, and there was that, but even more so, there was this sense of um, anxiety and a feeling of the walls closing in, but also this feeling of floating in empty space. And what, when I looked up derealization, it talked about anxiety, feelings of impending doom, feeling like you're dying. And there's definitely, I got a taste of that. It wasn't extreme. It didn't go on for a long time. It was just kind of these flashes throughout the day. And sometimes it would get pretty intense, and I would actually end up having kind of mild panic attacks, um, where, my heart rate would go out of control, and um, I get these kind of anxiety attacks. Um, and so, that's when I was like, okay, I need to figure out what's going on here, and kind of figure out what I'm doing wrong. And so I took a break, and you know, I uh, I I think there's always a balance to things, and sometimes you have to take a break to find balance. And there's also a certain amount of patience that you have to have. If you do things too quickly and change too quickly, then you may, you know, you may not be ready for it, and that's okay. So the important thing is uh, to enjoy yourself and maintain a healthy outlook. Um, and if you were to get carried away with this, um, it could really do some, uh, you know, I, in some way it could do damage. Uh, I mean, I want to say like for me, it could lead to uh, more severe anxiety attacks, and as that kind of grows and gets worse, then you get to, you start opening yourself up to a whole range of neuroses and mental illness, if you don't find some grounding and some balance. So basically, what my first impression was is like I need to figure out a way to ground myself because I'm floating out here in the middle of nowhere, and I need to figure out a way to stay focused and not lose myself and turn this into a bad trip, essentially. And so, what I did is I started incorporating into my illusory form practice, along with the, you know, focusing on the dreamlike nature of reality, also focusing on the, I was raised Christian, and there's teachings about the grace of God, and that the grace of God is always ever present, always available. And in the Tibetan teachings, there is a lot of uh, focusing on compassion for yourself and for others. And so I started incorporating, um, when I would do my illusory form exercises, I would also focus on visualizing the clear light awareness and focusing on compassion for myself and for others. And I've been doing that, and it helped a lot. However, I still am working on that. As I continue in the illusory form practice, it becomes stronger. And so I actually need to make sure that my practice grows along with that growing intensity. And so as I've been, uh, over the last year and a half, I've gotten every single book I can possibly find on Tibetan Dream Yoga. So I have pretty much every book on Tibetan Dream Yoga in paper, solid format, um, except for maybe some more mainstream sources. Um, I'm sure I'll eventually just like put all the books out in front of me and read them off, which is definitely something I can do. But what I started out with was the Tibetan Yogas of Dream and Sleep, and then I watched a ton of videos on YouTube from like the Western people, a bunch of Eastern people that I you know don't remember their names, and but the good stuff was in the books that I got, and I started by I went through Andrew Holochek's book. I went through B. Alan Wallace's book, and I just kept feeling this stronger pull to these teachings, and it just felt so familiar and in line with my experience. Like I mentioned before, as a kid, I it just felt so familiar to me. So I started getting books by Tibetan teachers, and um, so now I you just recently picked up the Six Yogas of Naropa, and this it's kind of a popular book. It's almost like a starting point um, for a lot of people, and for like Tibetan teachings. And um, one of the yogas is the yoga of the illusory body, and you have illusory form teachings in there. So I'm going through that right now. I'm already on a book about the teachings of Dream Yoga and Poa. I forget how to pronounce it. And Poa is actually teaching about how to exit your consciousness from your body. So in Western speak, that would be like out of body experience, astral projection, uh, and they have, it's within the Buddhist structure. They're using Buddha Amitabha. I think that's how it's pronounced. I'm always trying to figure out how to pronounce these things. Um, and Vajrayogini. Interestingly enough, I was actually drawn toward Vajrayogini before. I seem to be drawn toward uh, kind of dark feminine deities around, like in multiple different traditions. And Vajrayogini is kind of the deity that they focus on in that particular practice of Poa, which is pretty cool, considering that I was already drawn to her, and then I find this out. Um, and so I'm in the process of reading this book about Poa, which I will talk about later, and then I'm probably going to get to the Six Yogas of Naropa, and there's some other books on dreaming that I got as well. So it's really I got a pretty good haul this month, so I'm excited. And one of the things in Six Yogas of Naropa, and I'm going to have to read it to get fuller context, but for the Yoga of the Illusory Body, they teach that you meditate and create a mind frame in meditation meditating on the illusory nature of reality and the four blisses. And so, right there, you can see they have a balance between the kind of um, illusion of reality and I'm going to have to learn what the four blisses are. So, just full disclosure, I don't know what that is yet. I'm constantly learning more about Buddhism and constantly learning terms and imagery, symbolism, iconography. So I mean, religions in general are just deep. And I went to Bible college for years, and I grew up in Christianity, so I kind of have that in my bones. But I don't have that same advantage with Buddhism, which is fine. It takes a long time to absorb that and kind of figure out how that I have to figure out how it works in my framework, and then also do my best to figure out how it works in a Buddhist framework. Uh, because I'm never going to be raised Buddhist because that's already in the past. So I can't I can't just try to make a direct correlation or a direct interpretation. It doesn't work that way. I would have to like take out my programming and put a new one, and then I wouldn't be myself. So, uh, point being that it looks like that kind of balanced teaching is already there, and it's like clearly there in the six yogas of Naropa. Now, in the Tibetan yogas of dream and sleep, the exercises to balance are there, but it's not explicitly in the same practice. Um, and I don't think I've read anywhere talking about the risks of like a derealization experience, or depersonalization is a related kind of thing. So derealization is the feeling that you're dreaming, basically, and if it goes on long enough, it's considered a disorder, and it's described by the feeling of being trapped, feeling of being in a dream, and it often is accompanied by the feeling of being trapped and then impending doom or death, anxiety. It can kind of snowball into basically a bad trip. I mean, I had a psychedelic experience earlier this year with some edible stuff, and I think it actually gave me an interesting perspective on this because it was like a temporary experience of the derealization. And it wasn't really a very good experience for a couple of reasons. I was trying something new and it didn't work out very well. So those kind of things can turn into a bad trip. So you got to be careful and make sure that you have this kind of positive framework set up beforehand. And in my case, it's more about cultivating that and building that as I grow and advance to the next levels. So I need to make sure that I build that as I go along, because with each level of intensity, you have a higher risk of the negative experiences of derealization. So you need the equally increased strength of positivity. So that's definitely something I'm concentrating on. I'm working on. I'm focusing on. Uh, and so yeah, and uh, so the next thing I wanted to talk about is how my experience with illusory form has changed since the last time I recorded an episode. And it started changing maybe a month ago. And like I said, it's been a year and a half since I started practicing this on a daily basis. And what's been happening, excuse me, what's been happening is, and I noticed it first when I was visualizing things, but I also noticed it during my illusory form exercise. And so when I close my eyes, or even when I have them open, really, when I'm concentrating on something, it's almost as if um, I see everything in my field of vision as if it's a screen, especially when my eyes are closed, like it's this black screen. And then when I visualize, it's like something is projected onto that screen, and I can visualize things very clearly. Even open eye visualizations, I can concentrate and project shapes onto my field of vision. Um, so as you visualize a lot, you kind of start doing that, and you can have some really interesting experiences doing that, um, even beyond what I'm describing. And so, and I think that's like a byproduct of focus and concentration, because the more and maybe there's this practice called Zen, that Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche outlines in his book Tibetan Yogas of Dream and Sleep, where he says this is a meditation technique, and you place a sacred symbol at eye level in front of you, and you stare at this symbol while realizing its dreamlike nature. So a lot of these practices kind of include a multifaceted approach where uh, the symbol itself means something. And so the suggested symbol there, I believe, was the first letter of the Tibetan alphabet, the A, I believe it is, and it means something very similar to the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet, where it's like kind of the first utterance of creation, and it's like the breath, and it, there's a lot of meaning wrapped up into a single symbol, right? Tons and tons of meaning. And you just go on for hours about a single little symbol, and that's one of the things that's made this path so difficult and also interesting, because there's so much to learn. And as far as the symbols go, it's like, do these still hold the same power even if I don't know the meaning, right? So should I commit fully to all of these symbols even if I don't know their meaning, or should I learn the meaning of everything first and then use the symbols, right? So there's this kind of, if you're into occult teachings, you're very familiar with this kind of thing, um, and kind of how thought forms are created around symbols, and how there's this kind of feedback loop, uh, and it's really interesting. So in this practice of Zen, you're focusing on a sacred symbol. I happen to use a star tetrahedron, and I've got a quartz star tetrahedron that I look at when I meditate, and I focus on it's an illusory form practice, really. It's focusing on the illusory nature of this form, and it's a sacred form. And so at the same time that you've got in your mind this illusory form, you also have this sacred symbol, and it like intermixes really in a really interesting way. So that's, it's similar to that, because in that practice, it's all mixed together, right? So there's four, I believe it's in Tibetan Yogas of Dream and Sleep, it's called the four foundational practices. And basically it's your daytime, pre-sleep, nighttime, and morning practices. And they all kind of fit together. And so I'm like trying to figure out, what exactly is causing this particular experience, but I don't think I can actually parse it out and figure out, break it down. I actually think the system has developed over time specifically to work as a full system. That's what I'm starting to realize is like I used to think, oh, maybe I can cherry pick this and this, and then, I can benefit from this. But here's the thing. Stephen LaBerge mentions in his book, Exploring the World of Lucid Dreaming, I'm almost positive it's that book. It might be one of his other books. He mentions going to a Tibetan Dream Yoga retreat in California, I believe, and that's where he gets the initial impetus for his mild technique, his mnemonic initiated induced, mnemonic induced lucid dream, where you're imagining that you're lucid in a dream. Well, that's a practice in Tibetan Dream Yoga. You do that um, in several. It's like a few times during the day. During the day, I think it's in a couple different places where you imagine that your previous experience, this memory that you have, was a lucid dream experience. And so I'll talk more about that later. But with this Zion experience, um, it's you're sitting there staring at a symbol. I'm sitting there staring at this quartz star tetrahedron, and when I first started this practice, I could barely focus in one spot. Like I would try to I would try to put my eyes on and then I'd be like, wait, should I focus on this spot or that spot? And it was like I'd be trying to focus on one spot and my eyes would like involuntarily just start like going back and forth, and like it was almost like they were just like resisting staying still. Whereas now my eyes will just be still and I can be relaxed, and my field of vision actually goes from a focused point into a full, my awareness just kind of spreads out over the entire field of vision. So that's what's happening with my illusory form practice. That's what's happening with my visualization is I'm starting to have a different sense of awareness. And there's this great book called The Mind Illuminated by John Yates. Koludasa, I believe, is his chosen name. And he talks about the difference between attention awareness and another, I forget exactly what he calls it, but it's more of like a passive awareness. Um, and I'm starting to feel the difference between those two, where the passive awareness is actually really powerful. Like, wow. uh, and it feels like it's something else besides me, where the attention is like I'm focused and I'm powerful and I'm like using my will to like really focus and concentrate on something. Whereas this other kind of awareness is like it's almost like I'm tapping into something else and just gently directing it. And then I let go of it and it goes in that direction, right? And so I'm sitting there doing my illusory form, and my awareness just, instead of focusing on individual objects, I'm focused on every sensation in my body. It's going out to everything around me. It's all the feelings that I'm having. I'm the memories throughout the day, and it's starting to become a much more complete experience. And it's actually kind of scary because I can feel myself losing control. And what I mean by that is, like I said, there's like something else, this it's like I have my own awareness, and then there's awareness. Like it's like it's everywhere. Uh, and it's like I'm just kind of connecting to that, and I can navigate it, and I can even move it a little bit here and there. But it's definitely not taking orders from me. Like uh once I get into that flow and I submit myself to that flow, it's taken me somewhere, whether I like it or not. And yeah, I can get off and I can be done with it, but that takes a little bit of effort and a little bit of time. Um, so that's kind of what's been happening with me in the last couple months with my illusory form practice. And you know, it at first it felt like I was just not doing the exercise right, but then I started to realize there was like this other layer, and my awareness was not as focused, but it was larger and spreading out and just becoming more complete. And I think, as long as I stay consistent, as long as I keep going, then that is going to turn into a power that I have never experienced before in terms of awareness, a power of awareness that is just unbelievable. And so, of course, if you're going to get into that realm, better trust or have some kind of predictability, or because this brain of ours, if you are dealing with something unpredictable, it's going to get scared real quick. So it's very important to develop these kind of, you're able to summon positive feelings at will. Very important. So we only have a little bit of time left. I think I've been going for about 40 minutes. I want to do about 10 more minutes. A couple more things I wanted to go over. And that was the nighttime visualizations. I'll go through that real quick. It's not something exactly related to illusory form, but I wanted to just go into that, touch on it, and then maybe I'll do that in the next episode or a couple episodes down the road. Um, the illusory form is only one piece of the Tibetan Dream Yoga practice, and I could probably spend the rest of my life talking about it, right? Uh, so I don't want to spend too much time on each particular topic, but also I really want to dig into it. So I just want to touch real quick on these nighttime visualizations that I'm doing and what I've discovered doing them. Specifically, uh, there's these things called tiglas. It's spelled Tigle, and essentially they are spheres of light, and they can be certain colors. Uh, and so in, during the nighttime practices, you are meant to have three awakenings. This is for the dream yoga. This isn't, there's different practices for sleep yoga, but this is specifically the Tibetan yogas of dream and sleep teachings on dream yoga. And on the first awakening, which is supposed to be about 2 hours after you fall asleep, the first awakening, you are meant to uh, visualize a white tigla, which is basically a white orb at your third eye, right in between your eyebrows. And the white tigla has its own set of symbolism and meaning. And essentially, the white light, it's a very common kind of imagery with Tibetan Dream Yoga practices. For example, like visualizing the Hung symbol at the heart as you fall asleep. That's another one that I've found. Visualizing light. Another exercise is as you're getting ready to go to sleep, whatever arises in your mind, memories, etc., feelings, you know, you let that go into the light, uh, and then uh, you bring the light back in, um, and then you dissolve it. And that right there is a common theme as well in the teachings is um, focusing on white light of awareness and dissolving the illusory experience into the white light of awareness. And so one of the exercises is getting into a lucid dream and dissolving the dream into white light. Okay. And um, actually, I wrote some notes on this, and I should have had this ready. Um, I so this nighttime visualization of the Tigla, um, I began to think like I've been trying to work out how how these things work really, and I've been comparing it and contrasting it with Western lucid dreaming practices and certain kind of psychological things we know about our psychology. And yeah, I don't have a degree in psychology. It's kind of a hobby of mine. So I'm by no means an expert in that area. But it's also something where it's like interesting to see if I can, figure out what's going on psychologically with these things. And if I can do that, maybe I can kind of improve the exercise a little bit. So my impression with the white tea glow orb is basically visualizing white light as I'm falling back to sleep. I feel like that is, and having that kind of mindset of, um, the white light of awareness, the clear light of awareness, being aware and having that kind of meaning in that visualization. Once you go into the dream state and you start experiencing a dream and seeing light, then it seems that the association with the awareness would kick in. And so that's just one kind of taste of kind of the reflections I'm having uh, with these practices. Um, and I just wanted to touch on that. I need to kind of flesh that out a little bit more and kind of figure out kind of coalesce my thoughts there. Um, but I did want to kind of mention that, and that's something I'll be talking about in the future. And it's really like kind of me uh, diving into these exercises, experiencing them, feeling what it is for myself. And, I've been studying lucid dreaming practices for a long time. And also just kind of as a hobby, reading like lucid dreaming studies on Google Scholar, and just going through what researchers have been looking at with lucid dreaming, and also the surrounding psychology and neurology with these kind of experiences. And just as a side note, there are a lot of these Western techniques and methods that we've devised that have been experimented, and you know there's a lot of experimentation still going on in lucid dreaming. A lot of these things are being done or have been done in Tibet for hundreds of years. So that's just another reason to respect this tradition, because it's just they've spent so much time. Uh, these people are living isolated, maybe not completely isolated from society, but they dedicating their lives to a spiritual walk, spiritual practice, and they're just on a daily basis working out these exercises, working out these practices, seeing what works. They're not they didn't come up with these things. And they're not larpers. they're they're not playing around. They're doing this. It's intense, and it has real consequences psychologically, mentally, emotionally. And you know, they're not playing around, and they've been doing this for a long time. It's something to really respect. Um, and so I want to finish off this episode with, I want to talk about how these exercises create a web of awareness, and something that I've just been noticing. And earlier I mentioned the four foundational practices, and they're, it's daytime, pre-sleep, nighttime, and morning. Okay, and once I realized like that's what it was built around, I was like, man, I could just build my own practice from the ground up, right? And because this dream yoga, it provides a great structure to start a starting point, and you could just fill in all of the exercises, right? So I mean, for me, I want to practice the dream yoga as it's laid out as closely as I possibly can. I have changed things here and there, just for to try to make it more effective for myself, because sometimes it's so foreign to me that it just doesn't have an effect, and so I need to use things that are effective, right? So, for example, in Tibetan Yoga's Dream Sleep, it talks about Guru Yoga, and meditating on your guru, and it's just not really something that I can get into, and so I use in the place of a guru, I use like one of my dream guides. So it's just something I do. Okay, so let's end on how these exercises create a web. So here's how this goes. You're waking up in the morning, and you're remembering the dreams that you had. And if you had all lucid dreams, or you had aware, a lucid dreamless sleep, then you be thankful for that, and you just kind of dwell on that for a bit, and in the positivity of that, and resolve to do it again the next night. If you had a dream that wasn't lucid, you remember it and you imagine that you were lucid, and then you resolve to be lucid the next night. During the day, you're practicing your illusory form. You're imagining everything around you as a dream. Before you go to sleep at night, you're remembering your day, and you're imagining that all the memories that come up, that arise in your mind, were our lucid dreams. So you see this theme. It's repeating over and over again. Using your imagination and your memory to uh, kind of create these perspective memory triggers, where you're like, kind of, in the morning you're saying, okay, I remember my dreams. I'm imagining that I was lucid. Now I'm going to be lucid tomorrow night. So you're setting an intention for the future. That's perspective memory. And then you're also retrospective memory. Before you go to sleep at night, you're thinking back in your daytime memories and imagining that they're lucid dreams. You're using every you're using your memory in every way possible, and attaching this intent to be lucid and to be aware. And this is a mnemonic device. It's what LaBerge devised as mild mnemonic induced lucid dreaming. And this is something that you do 3 times during the day in the dream yoga practice. And so what ends up happening is it's especially obvious to me when I go to sleep, when I'm doing my pre-sleep practices, because I'll start remembering my illusory form exercises, and that'll give me a much better, much higher quality exercise, that pre-sleep exercise, is like much higher quality when I have a good illusory form during the day. And then it also increases that exercise's quality for other experiences I may have had during the day. And what I've done now is I'm just, laying in bed and I'm just letting the memories arise, whatever will arise, and then applying the, you know, imagining that it was a lucid dream. And then in the morning, I'm just allowing the dreams to arise and imagining that they were lucid dreams. And I'm noticing that it's starting to build upon itself. It's just snowballing. And I feel like the more I get into this practice, the more it's designed to do that. The more I believe it's designed to do that. It seems to be designed to slowly build upon itself. And it's like whoever devised these practices knew how the brain works very, very well. They really knew how memory works and how that ties into the emotions that you've experienced during the day and how those emotions arise before you go to sleep or when you sit down to meditate. And there's this really subtle but brilliant structure to this Tibetan Dream Yoga that I'm just scratching the surface, and I'm really excited to just keep on practicing this and getting more and more into it. So if you're listening, thank you for joining me. Obviously, if you gotta be listening if you can hear me. Um, Thank you for joining me in this journey. I hope you continue to listen. I hope it's useful, and I'm still figuring out kind of the beginnings of how to create this podcast, how to put it together. So I want to have a place for feedback and to get something going there. So that's episode 2 on illusory form. That's kind of a 2-part uh, thing there for illusory form, and I hope you all enjoyed it. I will see you next time.